It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Smoke, mirrors, and climate engineering. New from USA Today. This climate change fix could save the world, or doom it. From the report, wary experts say dystopian technologies to cool Earth could backfire. Eager businesses aren't listening to the warnings. Yes, that's exactly correct. For over 75 years of steadily ramped up climate engineering insanity, the money printers and the political puppets they control are not concerned about the consequences of tearing apart the planet's remaining life support systems so long as they can retain their power and keep business as usual till the last possible moment, which is so very close. Much closer than almost any yet dare to imagine. And here's the even more dire and immediate wild card. The moment the controllers know that populations are beginning to wake up to what's been done to them without their knowledge or consent, aka the proverbial pitchforks and torches moment, the power structure will play far more dire cards than those they've already played. Bet on it. And this could happen on any given day, as there are so many factors already past the breaking point. Is it time to prepare? Short answer, yes. From the UK Independent, Chinese city sees underwear falling from the sky after cloud seeding to break heat wave. From that report, heavy gusts of wind swept through a central Chinese city, sending people's laundry flying after authorities artificially stimulated rainfall to break a severe heat wave. Let's stop there and consider the mentality of attempting to hijack rain from wherever it was headed to temporarily and toxically cool a region that may have been without rain in the first place because of completely out of control climate engineering everything. It's a true circus of insanity, and we'll all pay the price if it's allowed to continue. Same theme. This new headline from MotherJones.com. The weather gods who want us to believe they can make rain on demand. And this news source, like all other major media sources, is still pretending that small-scale, localized, and overall meaningless weather modification operations are all we need to worry about, which is a blatant deception, even from this self-proclaimed independent news source. They want us all to focus on a few single-engine, propeller-driven airplanes or ground-based propane-burning so-called cloud seeding mechanisms or small Chinese weather modification rockets launched skyward. Never mind the fleets of geoengineering jet aircraft that are spewing out their toxic climate engineering filth in skies all over the world, with some of these jets like a KC-135 being capable of carrying up to 100 tons of toxic nanoparticle filth in a single payload. Yes, don't pay any attention to any of that. Nothing to see here, so long as you don't look up or are clinically blind. And there's the just blame nature strategy as well. This is an example. The sun is doing something that it is not supposed to do, and that could mean big trouble in the months ahead. That's from Michael Snyder. Yes, just blame it all on the sun. Never mind the fact that climate intervention has now decimated our once protective atmosphere, which makes all life on Earth far more vulnerable to whatever the sun does. And again, our latest measurements of UV radiation from geoengineeringwatch.org indicate that there's about 30% of the ozone layer remaining. Not 30% gone, 30% remaining. Where does that leave us? No functional ozone layer, game over. Not overnight, but when you can no longer grow food, when the oceans are dead because the plankton are being fried as they feed in the upper layers of the water column, which is already happening. We have peer-reviewed study from the Atlantic stating 90% decline in plankton populations there. We have fisheries crashing all over the globe. Oceans are superheating, the thermal energy buildup from the intense UV radiation, and the other factors as well. Countless forms of anthropogenic activity, with climate engineering at the top of the list, with reflective particles that can cause temporary toxic short-term surface cooldowns, but trap more heat than they deflect overall. What a great idea for cooling the planet that is. And what about the highly toxic fallout from climate intervention operations? Aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese, surfactants, polymer fibers, graphene, and more. Let's look at this new report from phys.org. Soil pollution surpasses climate change as top threat to underground biodiversity, study finds. The report states earthworms, insects, and mites are all at risk from soil pollution, and scientists are worried that we know very little about the damage it's causing. They continue. Pesticide and heavy metal pollution cause the most damage to soil biodiversity. This is worrying, they say. Its effects might be more widespread than we know. Also from the report, new research published in the journal Science found that soil pollution was the leading cause of declines among organisms living underground. The findings, again they say, have surprised scientists who already expected farming intensification and climate change to have much greater impacts. Summary. Soil microorganism die-off is far worse than the worst-case predictions because the biggest piece of the puzzle is being denied and thus ignored. Toxic rain from climate engineering fallout, the primary elements of which, again, are heavy metal nanoparticles, starting with free-form bioavailable aluminum, which, for the record, is toxic to all life forms, no exceptions. Now let's factor in the off-the-charts UV radiation I mentioned a moment ago. That's blistering Earth's surface thanks to the rapidly deteriorating ozone layer, another consequence of climate engineering operations that all official sources are committed to denying. Tell me, with your sense of reason, do you think it's more likely that hairspray cans in the 70s and 80s were the cause of the deteriorating ozone layer and the countless jet tankers carrying 100-ton payloads spewing them, ozone-destroying particulates, spewing that into the sky, that's not a bigger factor than a hairspray can? Really? More headlines of a dying planet that so many, including in alt media, continue to deny. From RNZ News, New Zealand. Great Barrier Reef already been dealt its death blow. That's from a scientist. An Australian climate scientist has told a conference, quote, it's likely Australia's Great Barrier Reef has already been dealt its death blow. Here's an excerpt quote from the expert cited in the report. Scientists know it's likely that the extensive reef-wide bleaching of this year has dealt the largest living structure on this planet its death blow. The report continues, it's just not possible for some ecosystems to adapt to climate change, and it's dangerous to pretend that they can. Yes, it is dangerous. And how many keep pretending? So many pretending that if you just ignore the truth, shove your head in the sand, think happy thoughts, everything will magically work out. And that's not working out so well, is it? Final excerpt from this report. The world's top climate science body has projected only 1% of the world's coral reefs would be left after 2 degrees Celsius of global heating. And that's over the pre-industrial baselines. And then they say over 1 degree C has already occurred. That's totally false. I'll get to that in a moment. The Great Barrier Reef was World Heritage listed in 1981 and is considered one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. It covers 344,400 square miles and is 2,300 kilometers long. Let's stop there. So the report admits coral reefs are done after 2 degrees C of warming over pre-industrial baselines. That doesn't bode well when considering unfiltered frontline temperature data indicates we're already past 3.5 degrees C of warming over pre-industrial baselines. And now let's add this from phys.org. Extreme weather to strengthen rapidly over the next 2 decades, research suggests. Really? So this source expects us to ignore the fact that it's happening right now in real time. For the record, based on all available statistics, there's absolutely no need to worry about what sources like this say is coming in the next 2 decades. Because if we collectively remain on the current course, no one will be here. Don't believe that's possible? I understand. But those that don't will soon. Wait and see. This is Dane Wigington. You're listening to the weekly installment of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Report, The End of the World as We Know It broadcast, brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of global climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare. Reaching a critical mass, that is the goal. That's the imperative. That's the only way forward in this fight. We can and we absolutely must reach a critical mass of awareness by starting a conversation on climate engineering that leads people to a credible source of data. Geoengineeringwatch.org will continue all of our efforts to be the go-to source on covert climate engineering operations. A conversation on climate engineering can easily be started with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials available on our homepage. You can also search the activist suggestions link for specific instructions on how you can help to move this fight forward. Please help us to sound the alarm. More on the firestorms from KTLAnews.com. Southern California ablaze with 3 major wildfires. Wednesday, Governor Newsom announced that a federal grant had been secured to help with the cost of fighting the fire. Our fire season is really just starting now, Newsom stated. As I have mentioned many times, Newsom knows the truth. I personally met with Newsom and his top aide in his office at the Capitol. They didn't even try to refute the climate engineering data I presented with extreme urgency. Everything I told Newsom would happen if climate engineering was allowed to continue has happened and will continue to happen at an ever larger scale. Newsom's response, while I was with him in his office, he leaned back in his leather chair, sighed, and said, quote, "I didn't need this," end quote. And he has never acknowledged the issue or the meeting since. From the LA Times, SoCal monster fires explode. Homes burned, 13 hurt, communities threatened. From Reuters News.com, California wildfires burned dozens of homes and ski resort. It's a ski resort that I frequently visited in my youth, and portions of the San Gabriel Mountains that were my cathedral while growing up. San Antonio Canyon, south of Mount Baldy. I first began to camp alone overnight in this formerly spectacular wilderness from the age of 12. And it's so very painful to know it's going up in flames. It breaks my heart. But no more than the rest of the world and the web of life going up in flames. And so much more is coming. Is any relief coming for California? Not so much. The coming scheduled cool down for California and the elimination of any significant moisture that the weather terrorists do allow to migrate over the parched and incinerating U.S. West, because chemical ice nucleation cloud seeding operations can cause only a temporary toxic surface cool down, and this comes at the cost of drying up much or most of the available moisture. That's how it works. That's an endothermic reacting element, energy absorbing element, dries up much of the moisture. Search the engineering winter section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for shocking images and data for a core part of climate engineering that unfortunately only geoengineeringwatch.org is trying desperately to expose. On the other side of the world, more incinerations, so many more. From ABC News, out-of-control fires ravage the Amazon region. From that report, the Amazon is in its worst state of the last 50 years, they say. That's a lie. The fires in the state of the Amazon is in completely uncharted territory. Matrix media always tries to falsely give the impression it's happened before, even if it hasn't. And far too many are willing to buy the lies so they don't have to face the truth. From MSN.com, an Amazon river dries up, creating hellish crossings for villagers. Really shocking images in this report of vast sand riverbed, hazy smoke-filled skies, and villagers trying to cross to find water somewhere. The report says only the youngest and strongest villagers now brave the crossing of a vast blistering stretch of sand in the resilient Amazon, baking under temperatures of 40 degrees Celsius or more. That's about 104 degrees. They say this: every year it's worse. Experts link Brazil's historic drought to climate change. Of course, everything is climate change. And nothing is climate engineering because we're told it doesn't exist even though we can see it so clearly in our skies. The report says the parched conditions have fueled wildfires in the Amazon and elsewhere in the country that have clouded major cities in smoke pollution. More bad news on the Amazon in a moment, a tale of drought devastation and firestorm incinerations. And about epic drought and unprecedented firestorms. Please search the engineering drought section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org and the engineering wildfire section. And keep this in mind. The laws of physics state clearly it must rain more on a warming planet. 7% more moisture is held in the atmosphere for every degree C of warming. If it's not raining more overall, and it's not, yes, there's deluges in places because when you stop rain from falling in one place, it falls in a deluge somewhere else, or vice versa. If you cause a deluge, that rain didn't get where it was going. But all of it inseparable from climate intervention operations. And why would we think otherwise? And how many continue to ignore this very real and present danger for all of us. From climate crisis 24/7, the Mississippi River is drying up again. Back and forth, weather whiplash, drought whiplash, firestorm roulette, weather warfare, all inseparable. From nature.com, wildfires are spreading fast in Canada. That continues. From USA Today, humans warmed Earth, can't we just cool it? Question mark. Here are some ideas. Again, that's from USA Today. They say, could we MacGyver our way out of climate change? Question mark. These climate change fighting ideas, aka geoengineering, sound outlandish, the report states. Even if they did work, critics worry they could backfire spectacularly. Really? Could, may, might? How about already has and continues to get worse by the day? What will it take for more people to look up, observe what they see in our skies, connect the dots at collapsing ecological everything, and realize that on top of all the forms of human damage to the planet, and that list is long, it's endless. Anybody who denies that we've been horrible stewards of the planet is not awake. They're asleep at the wheel. But to intentionally intervene in the planet's life support systems and the planet's attempt to respond and compensate for the damage already done is truly a recipe for near-term planetary omnicide. More from the USA Today report. To hydrate the atmosphere, another great idea from USA Today. Wonder why we have such massive droughts here and there, because these are desiccant particles, by the way. Climate engineers, again, with desiccant particles, can create too many condensation nuclei, dry up the rain, migrate it somewhere else. And with larger condensation nuclei being seeded, they can cause the rain to come down in a deluge. And what do we see around the globe? Drought, deluge scenarios everywhere. More great suggestions from USA Today and so-called scientists. Create bubble curtains to keep warm water from melting glaciers. They also have the cover the poles with reflective tarps. How science fiction moronic can all this be from the so-called science community? They say fill the skies with dust or gas to reflect the sun's rays. That's familiar, isn't it? We're talking about that now. Add iron to the oceans so they can absorb more carbon dioxide. More on that subject in a moment. Build enormous industrial parks that do nothing but suck carbon dioxide out of the air and bury it deep underground. We already have one of those plants. I think the Orca plant is in Greenland or somewhere. And 1 year's worth of production on that plant eliminates about 3 seconds of CO2 produced on the planet. What a great idea that is. The report states humans produce about 35 billion tons of carbon dioxide every year. About 500 billion tons of carbon dioxide would need to be removed to return to pre-industrial levels of carbon dioxide. That wouldn't return us to anything. Because the forests, the oceans, they're already done, dead. They don't just bounce back when you flick a switch, even if there was some magical way to do what they propose. We live in a full-blown asylum, and this came from researchers at MIT. Solar geoengineering, the report says, involves launching sulfur dioxide or other materials into the stratosphere so that these particles can reflect some of the sun's energy back to space, artificially cooling Earth. It doesn't work. It's a weapon of war, period. And these reflective particles trap more heat than they deflect. This is not rocket science here. It's a form of reason that is no longer common in our species. No longer. They then say this: no one has yet worked out how to get the aerosols up in the atmosphere or to reflect the sun's rays at the kind of scale that would be necessary. What a colossal lie. They haven't worked it out. We've had these patents and film footage of these patents being utilized since 1923. It's in the dimming. It's in one of my previous presentations. We have film footage of spray dispersion mechanisms on biplanes flying in formation in 1923. Here we are 101 years later, and we have USA Today telling us that no one has worked out how we could possibly get those aerosols up into the atmosphere. And people believe this while they're watching scripted political idiocy day in, day out. We are truly doomed on this course, truly doomed. The manipulators of the matrix are completely falsifying data across the board. All is far worse than what's being disclosed. Temperatures are actually far higher both day and night than we're being told. Droughts are far worse. And the trajectory we are all on doesn't lead to a happy ending. And you can quote me on that. From the Engineering Institute of Technology, this: climate change, is geoengineering a cure? The report states, as climate change intensifies, policymakers, climate scientists, and members of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that's the IPCC, largest scientific panel ever created on any subject in human history, by the way, their job to cover the tracks of the climate engineers. But they have suggested novel methods to counteract harmful trends. These climate intervention techniques are referred to as geoengineering. Despite its potential benefits, the report says, some argue that this planetary fix might be more harmful than the initial problem. There are even calls to remove it from higher education curriculums. How about removing it from our skies and not pretending it's not there? From futures.issafrica.org, Africa should brace itself for geoengineering. That's the headline. They say radical measures to temporarily pause global heating may come with destabilizing effects. You think? They then say the rise of global average temperatures at present is already triggering severe weather volatility much sooner than anticipated. We knew at geoengineeringwatch.org, I knew, I've stated on the record for close to 20 years, 15 of those years at geoengineeringwatch.org. How could they not know? They just simply weren't willing to admit to the truth because they could still hide it then, no longer. From the Washington Post, Southern California's bridge fire devours 34,000 acres within hours. The blaze in Angeles National Forest grew rapidly from just a few thousand acres early Tuesday. That's the fire that burnt down the cathedral where I grew up. The forest is my cathedral. It always has been. The trees, my sentient comrades there, all going up in flames. They say spurring mandatory evacuation orders for communities in the area. The fire has run clear across the San Gabriel Mountains in a single day and may well end up in the high desert. Again, this kind of fire has never happened historically, only recently, and there are reasons for this. Please search the engineering wildfire section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. The source of ignition, separate subject entirely. What's setting the template for these fires to burn with such ferocity? And that is climate engineering. Not denying other sources of damage to the planet, not at all. But, again, must have more overall rain on a warming planet based on the laws of physics, 7% more moisture for every degree C of warming. If that's not happening, then there's a factor we're not being told about, and that factor is climate engineering. From KCAL News, Southern California, extreme heat causing power outages around Southern California. Let's add this. In another part of the world, same theme, extreme heat and power outages from the New York Times. Kuwait is awash in oil money, but it can't keep the power on. The Persian Gulf nation has instituted rolling blackouts to cope with surging summer electricity demand, stirring frustration among citizens. Again, let's remember the United Arab Emirates recently had heat index temperatures of above 150. And what do? Crank up the air conditioners to warm the climate even more. Back to California from the LA Times. Brutal heat wave breaks records across Southern California. Also from the Times. Even at night, SoCal, Southern California, sees little cool down from record-breaking heat. Again, nighttime temperatures are rising twice as fast as daytime highs. That's trapped heat. Climate engineering, a core part of that equation. New from NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, Earth had its hottest August in a 175-year record. The sweltering month was also the 15th month in a row of record warm months and wrapped up in the Northern Hemisphere's warmest meteorological summer on record. This report is from many sources, and NOAA is one. Am I a fan of NOAA? National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration? Absolutely not. Power structure-controlled agencies and media only tell the truth when it can no longer be hidden. The planet is spiraling into total meltdown, an abrupt climate collapse scenario. And though, again, there are countless anthropogenic causes, climate engineering is at the top of the list. But what about this? From AccuWeather.com, major cool down to erase heat across the West. But, as stated a moment ago, the drying out of the U.S. West continues unabated. Chemical ice nucleation cloud seeding operations are core to the often mostly dry cool downs, or at least far less rain than should have fallen. It's part of the process with endothermic reacting climate engineering chemical ice nucleating elements. Search the Engineering Winter section, homepage, geoengineeringwatch.org. More consequences. New from NBC News, Salt Lake City's efforts to fight pollution face a new challenge, toxic dust. Declining water levels expose much of the Great Lakes bed and created conditions for storms of dust laden with toxic metals that now threaten 2 million people. What about the toxic metals raining down through air columns everywhere around the world from so much material being dispersed in our skies that can literally blot out the entire formerly blue sky? But that's not admitted to anywhere, so it's always attributed to something else. I'm not denying what's happening in Utah, but there's so much more to the equation that no one wants to talk about. No official agency, no so-called elected official, no bought and sold environmental group that's protecting their 501c3 nonprofits. They won't admit to any of this. Total criminal hypocrisy. From WFAA.com, Texas Agriculture Commissioner sounds the alarm, says Texas is running out of water. And then there's the deluge part of the climate engineering fuels drought and deluge scenario. Stated that for 15 years. From AP News, Pakistan hasn't learned lessons from 2022 deadly floods, experts say. The rains and floods have destroyed 80% of cotton crops in parts of Pakistan, and that's the primary source of income for farmers. It's also killed hundreds of livestock. Question, what didn't the Pakistanis learn? That nonconformance to Western power dictates leads to catastrophic weather disasters? Is this the same category as the recent 180-degree heat index temperature in Iran that happened under an ionosphere heater-induced heat dome? You decide. Also from AP News, drying lakes and thirsty trees in drought-hit Greece. Water trucks are keeping crops alive. That's not going to last long. Greece has also, in many ways, tried to push back against the power structure, and perhaps this is their reward. From the Weather Channel, how about this? A bit of a follow-up to the sewage, fertilizer, and farm fields I covered last week. From the Weather Channel, just add sewage, reviving a river. I didn't make that up. Look it up for yourself. They say add sewage, and the river will come back, along with all the wildlife. Sure, you treat it a little bit, but it's sewage. Farm field sewage, river sewage, fix the climate with toxic elements. We live in an absolute planetary asylum. And you can't live long in a toxic fishbowl. We're about to find that out the hard way. From phys.org, a chemical cocktail of micropollutants amplified effect of algal toxics blooms in 2022. Mass fish mortality events. Yes, superheating aquatic anything and everything, and then mass algae blooms. Everything dies. All these toxins in the mix just, again, as this report says, amplified everything. It's now become the norm. From thewatchers.org, the first major chemical ice nucleation cloud seeding surface cool down for Europe. Here's the headline. Listen to this. Europe braces for extreme rainfall and flooding as heat dome collapses. Now let's add this. From Severe Weather Europe, more detail on this complex, highly destructive engineered winter event. Europe braces for the first significant cold outbreak this autumn season 2024. They say, listen carefully, a lot of detail here, read between the lines. The general weather pattern over Europe has completely flipped compared to what has been going on for weeks. In fact, since mid-August. The historic heat waves are over and dynamic autumn season patterns have been established. Sounds a bit manufactured, doesn't it? This week, a significant temperature change will spread across much of Europe thanks to an established broad corridor of meridional flow from the north towards the deep south and the Mediterranean. From Thursday through Saturday, a strong contrast between the air masses, again, high pressure zone manipulation of moisture flows, will produce a frontal system. Also sounds manufactured across Central Europe and the Mediterranean. It will trigger another excessive rainfall event and more risk for flooding. Again, they need a lot of moisture for chemical nucleation. I've been over that again and again. Temperatures, they say, will be the coldest in autumn 2024 with this cold outbreak. The Severe Weather Europe report continues with these details. A blocking high on the north, that's a high pressure zone, on the North Atlantic, and a deep upper trough emerging into Western and Northwestern Europe will open a corridor towards the south. The Atlantic blocking high-pressure ridge cuts the corridor between the Arctic and the continental Europe, introducing the cold core to become trapped and slow down its progress over the Mediterranean. This is total manipulation. If you look at the surface temperature maps, you see a big patch of blue below normal temperatures surrounded by red above normal temperatures. But where's the focus? Only where it's a chemical cold scenario, and that's where the sensationalized headlines will be. And What's the power structure payoff again for engineering winter weather? Headlines like this from Bloomberg.com: Europe faces early snows and floods as extreme weather grips region. From Powder Magazine: European ski resorts see September snow. And then there is this. Listen carefully. This is from weather.net. Here we go. Massive onset of winter snow chaos, up to 2 meters of snow, extreme flooding, then back to 25 degrees C. That's 80 plus degrees. Think about that. From record high temperatures, the massive sensationalized snowmageddon snowstorm, and then bouncing right back to 80 something degrees, even though we're even further into winter. Who could think that's nature or natural? It's not. It's been going on in the U.S. for how long? Denver routinely now whiplashes between record highs in the 80s and single digits in a day. Going back to 2013, there was an instance in Texas of a 100-degree all-time record high, May 1st, 2013, to snow the next day. That's not nature. California, going back a number of weeks, we had the August snow in California and then right back to record high temperatures immediately. So for those that jump up and down and wave their pom-poms that these engineered cool downs are somehow sign of global cooling, get a clue. Please get a clue. It's a sign of climate engineering. Please tell the truth, because you're in the same boat the rest of us are in, and that boat is sinking rapidly, and climate engineering is the biggest hole in the bottom of it. So just how cold is it again, really? As I stated before, Earth has just had its hottest August in 175 years of record keeping, 15 consecutive months of record high global temperatures in a row. We have monthly above normal temperatures. We're at 47 or 48 years in a row. Think about that. And here's the absolute bottom line. Any discussion of climate, anything from any perspective, is illegitimate unless or until climate engineering is acknowledged and accounted for first and foremost. No legitimate discussion of climate anything from any perspective without first and foremost addressing climate engineering, period. Keep that in mind. From AccuWeather, let's look at this scenario. 5 reasons behind the historic absence of tropical storms this hurricane season. They say it has been the longest stormless streak in the Atlantic Basin in over 50 years, and AccuWeather meteorologists point to several factors that have put a temporary pause in the 2024 hurricane season. They say delayed arrival of La Nina, warm versus cold water, stable upper atmosphere, convoluted African wave train, and abundance of dry, dusty air. No acknowledgement of the fact that the U.S. military has been involved in climate engineering, hurricane modification operations since 1947 Project Sirius. No acknowledgement of that. They can make or break these storms anytime they want. And we can speculate on the agendas or objectives of whichever direction they go with this. But the bottom line is interfering with the planet's life support system always leads to a bad result, period. From CNN, this hurricane season is confounding experts and defying forecasts. What the heck is going on? ? That's their headline. And no acknowledgement of the climate engineering elephant in the sky that can't not be core to this equation. It must be, and it is. The Atlantic Ocean is enveloped in a rare and strange calm, they say, that has flummoxed forecasters and reset their expectations, and the whole thing could be a glimpse at what's to come as the planet gets hotter. Can you see the total contradiction? They told us it's going to be the worst hurricane season ever. Then we have this lull. We don't know what's coming in front of us. We don't know because they can change the script anytime they want. Anytime they want. The Atlantic Ocean is hotter than normal, the report says. Yes, it is. Unlike the headlines from 2 weeks ago that made it sound like the whole ocean was going into a deep freeze. And a lot of people bought that. So just when it seemed that the weather forecasters, aka schedule weather script readers, would have some explaining to do about the hurricanes disappearing, Hurricane Francine suddenly appears. And Francine was kept in a disorganized state over the Gulf of Mexico. Oil infrastructure, what a surprise. Don't want to damage that oil pumping, do we? And this is common now to keep these storms weaker until they're close to land and can be steered with frequency transmissions. And if you want to see this happening in real time with previous storms, please search geoengineeringwatch.org hurricanes on some search engine other than Google. You can find a number of reports with those recordings in them. You can see the frequency transmissions actually steering storms like Ian and Harvey and a number of others. They're there. From BBC, Francine brings floods and power cuts to Louisiana and Mississippi, and the damage was apparently so minimal that most mainstream TD Matrix media sources devoted about 30 seconds to covering Hurricane Francine and then bounced right back to nonstop, hours-long coverage of the scripted election theater dog and pony show. No matter how much chaos and carnage is going on around the globe, conflict zones to climate engineering, election theater dog and pony show. And the last occupant of the White House to actually draw a line in the sand with the true controllers of the Matrix, the money printers, was John F. Kennedy. And he didn't live long after doing so, did he? And since that time, the rest is smoke and mirrors, puppet candidates that may or may not even realize that they're nothing more than actors in a power structure production of scripted mass distraction. From NewScientist.com, the jet stream may be starting to shift in response to climate change. They say sections of the planet's jet stream have begun shifting towards the poles. Over the past several decades, it's most likely that this is a response to global warming due to greenhouse gas emissions and could exacerbate heat and drought in regions that depend on high-altitude winds to steer their storms. This is total mass deception. There is no legitimate discussion of climate anything without addressing climate engineering, the atmospheric pressure zone manipulation that steers the jet stream, thus steers moisture patterns. And we're told to believe the experts that seem to know how to do nothing more than lie about everything, and not just in this arena. There's lots more lies going on in other arenas that we have learned over the last few years, haven't we? From LifeScience.com, Gulf Stream collapse would throw tropical monsoons into chaos for at least 100 years, study finds. First, global climate intervention operations have already thrown the global hydrological cycle into total chaos going back many decades. And next, the current rate of ecological collapse dictates, aquatic and terrestrial, that there's definitely no need to worry about anything 100 years out or even 10 years out. No one will be here. Again, if we remain on the current course, and so far it's even worse than that, the human race as a whole is hitting the accelerator, pedal to the metal until the moment of impact. It's coming faster than almost anyone dares to imagine. Wait and see. Here's another headline on that exact theme: climate and ecological collapse, not 100 years out. Now, more Amazon devastation from news.mongabay.com. Extreme drought pushes Amazon's main rivers to lowest levels ever. They say amid an extreme, unprecedented drought, almost all major Amazon rivers have registered their lowest levels in history. Experts say the outlook for the next months is even worse, putting researchers on alert for the possibility of Amazon's worst drought ever. It already is. Didn't they just say that? Winds are carrying the smoke from the burning forest as the Amazon is experiencing its worst fire season in the past 19 years. Also a lie. They, as I stated earlier and many times before, articles like this always try to paint the picture that this has happened in the past, so it can't be that bad, right? Wrong. A thick layer of soot covers nearly 60% of Brazil and threatens to reach Argentina and Uruguay. Also from mongabay.com, drought forces Amazon indigenous communities to drink mercury-tainted water. That's partly from making America great again by buying gold from gold mines that are pirated into the jungles with no environmental concerns or anything, dumping mercury into everything, and now the indigenous are having to drink it. And that's what Americans don't consider when we are exporting our decimation to other countries and funding it and fueling it in various ways. Americans don't think about that, but that's how it is. And when massive grants are given to other countries, guess what? The people never see that money. It goes to corrupt dictators. The country's saddled with debt, and they're forced to pay back the bankers with their resources. That's how it works. Let's add this, new from Reuters.com. In arid New Mexico, rural towns eyed treated oil wastewater as a solution to drought. So many great ideas from the ranks of the human race. Spraying our skies with a plethora of toxic elements as part of climate engineering, solar radiation management operations, including a base material of coal fly ash. Fertilizing our farm fields with toxic sewage sludge, as covered in last week's broadcast and earlier in this one. And using extremely toxic fracking wastewater as a solution to drought. Welcome to the planetary asylum. On the same theme of the collective insanity, a week ago, September 7th, was the UN official International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies. The International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies is designed by the United Nations General Assembly, 7th of September, to strengthen international cooperation in improving air quality and reducing air pollution. Really? International Day of clean air for blue skies, while geoengineering jet spray dispersions crisscross our skies, lingering and expanding into various forms of toxic overcast, raining out in our air, soils, waters, and certainly blotting out our formerly blue skies. The International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies. What an absolute travesty. On another note, this week was the anniversary of the 9/11 event. How many continue to wave their flags in full support of the official narratives regarding this event? Question: how many self-proclaimed patriots have ever taken the time to actually do an objective investigation of what actually took place before, during, and after that day? Answer: almost none. It seems it's far easier to go with the flow, to gulp down whatever the manipulators of the Matrix say is the truth, even if it isn't. The same holds true for the orchestrated conflict zones around the world, with the same core of control dictating what Matrix media is allowed to report or not to report. The Matrix manipulators of mainstream media tell you who's good and who isn't. And be careful of questioning the narrative, or you may be subject to immediate demonization. And above it all, the climate engineering onslaught continues to rage. More on that in a moment. You're listening to the weekly installment of Global Alert News, the Bad News Broadcast, installment number 475, September 14th, 2024. Yes, I'm exhausted after 475 weeks in a row of this broadcast and many others in between. I do many other interviews with many other platforms during the week and communications all over the globe. Yes, 7 days a week. I'm at this and have been for as long as I can remember. Global Alert News is brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of climate intervention operations, known as geoengineering. Recordings of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News broadcast can be found on the homepage of Geoengineeringwatch.org under the recent column and on the Dane Wigington YouTube channel. I want to express my deepest gratitude to all those that have stood with me in this battle. It is a team effort. If you're on an email list, please put us on your email contact book so that our mailouts don't go to the spam files. Please help us to share the groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming, which fully exposes the climate engineering atrocities. Again, now with 25,400,000 views, something in that range. Thank you for your help. The best way to share is by circulating the direct link to The Dimming by email directly from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Sharing directly helps us to overcome social media censorship. When viewing our YouTube of The Dimming or Global Alert News or any other Geoengineering Watch video on YouTube, please subscribe, share, and comment, and all of this helps us to circulate critically important data to a much wider audience about reaching those that still aren't looking up. Start a conversation with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials, which can be found on our homepage. Our only goal: provide activists what they need to move this fight forward. Extremely high-quality printed materials, shocking images. We provide these materials for less than our overall cost of producing and shipping. I have one goal, one mission. I live for the day when this insanity in our skies is fully exposed, brought to a halt, so that our planet can respond on its own to the damage done. We can at least buy time if we can do that. We have Geoengineering Watch hoodies, Geoengineering Watch shirts, photos of both on our homepage. We have scannable business cards, bumper stickers, all effective tools to help strike up a conversation on the climate engineering issue. Key to the door: get people to look. Reaching a critical mass of awareness, again, only way forward in this fight. If we can expose it, we can stop it from the inside out. If you're willing to share a picture of yourself with a Geoengineering Watch t-shirt or hoodie, ideally in some crowded location, please send your photo to us so that we can post it as part of our activist compilation, which is now part of our materials page. The images encourage others to make their voices heard in this all-important battle to sound the alarm. As always, to those that are steadfastly committed to exposing and halting the climate engineering insanity, you have my deepest gratitude now and forever. It is our collective efforts that can yet make a difference. Moving on from so-called Scientific American. Scientists will engineer the ocean to absorb more carbon dioxide. Mentioned this earlier. I brought it up in another broadcast. Again, what a great idea. As if they haven't long since been doing so with absolutely catastrophic consequences. From the report, scientists plan to seed part of the Pacific Ocean with iron to trigger a surface bloom of phytoplankton that will hopefully suck carbon dioxide out of the air, reviving field trials of a geoengineering technique that has been taboo for more than a decade. Now let's add this. From the U.S. National Science Foundation: oceans acidifying faster today than in the past 300 million years. And though this report isn't new, the ocean acidification is even worse now than it was then, and it's accelerating rapidly. Published this year from Britannica, Ocean Acidification, Definition, Causes, Effects, Chemistry. This is July 2024. Ocean acidification, the worldwide reduction in the pH of seawater as a consequence of the absorption of large amounts of carbon dioxide by the oceans. So again, what a great idea. Let's supercharge the process of killing our seas in order to hide a bit of what industrialized, militarized, so-called civilization is dumping into our atmosphere. And there's the climate engineering jets doing the dumping that are further adding to the CO2 loading. This is like pushing to pull, isn't it? How can you possibly think there's any sanity in this? How can anyone think that? And we have the so-called climate science community either backing this, participating either actively or passively to protect their paychecks and pensions. That's criminal. That's absolutely criminal. Send a link to the dimming to anyone you find authoring these articles or any so-called climate scientist, elected official, environmental agency group. Send them a link to the dimming and ask them to explain that or why they're not addressing it. We took a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration flying lab to altitude, top scientists in it, tested what heavy aircraft were emitting and processed that at Rensselaer Polytechnic in New York, world-renowned laboratory, and found exactly what we knew we would find. Climate engineering elements starting with aluminum nanoparticles, end of debate. It's happening, period. And yet the denial persists, doesn't it? In fact, the reality of this equation is this. Ocean fertilization has long since been taking place as a core aspect of climate engineering, just like chemical ice nucleation operations. A peer-reviewed published study had already proven that nanoparticle elements being utilized for climate engineering solar radiation management operations match the chemical signature of coal fly ash, which appears to be the base material for SRM. That's the mentality of those in power. The solution to pollution is dilution. Just spray it everywhere and blame the coal plants. Not that they shouldn't bear much blame, but when you intentionally use this as a base material, and why would they? Because many of the coal fly ash elements are also elements being promoted for ocean fertilization. Conclusion, solar radiation management operations conducted over oceans are also being utilized as ongoing ocean fertilization operations as the jet-sprayed toxic nanoparticles migrate down through the air column to the sea surface. We, all of us, each of us, along with the entire web of life, or at least what's left of it, are all the subjects of an ongoing grand and lethal experiment that the controllers of the Matrix first fully deployed over 75 years ago, immediately after World War II. Climate engineering operations, which have long since also included the so-called ocean iron fertilization scenarios. This is a major contributor to the now over 500 ocean dead zones, zones that are expanding by the day as we hurtle toward what is known as Canfield Ocean. Superheated, lifeless, stratified, deoxygenated dead zones. Oceans die, we die. Almost out of time. This is an on-air broadcast. I have a strict time slot, but here's a few more details on firestorms since fire season is now an all-year event in many regions. From UCNRS.org, that's University of California, the best way to fight back against fires, ? More fire, they say. The report then states scientists know little about predicting wildfires and protecting communities. Well, that part's true, at least. This is the same category as former Trump appointee Ryan Zinke, whose message was basically that the way to prevent forest fires is to completely clear-cut the forest. Problem solved. No more forest, no more fires. And it seems that's what University of California is stating, because when you start a fire now, it burns down the forest. It's not like in the past. These fires are not beneficial. About Zinke, a reminder headline from the Washington Post in 2018, Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke resigns amid investigations. What a surprise. Is the current administration any better? No. Is any occupant of the White House actually in control of anything? No. Next, more lies. From the power structure paid for halls of academia, from Stanford University, understanding how wildfires change soil could aid recovery. From National Geographic, the ecological benefits of fire. All lies. Under the current conditions, forests aren't coming back in any time frame that matters. I've stated that on The Record, this broadcast, many others for a decade and a half, and now finally some confirmation of the truth by sources that are finally beginning to tell it. From the University of Colorado Boulder, forests scorched by wildfire are unlikely to recover and may convert to grasslands. And this, from the Deseret.com, the combination of hotter, drier temperatures and bigger, more frequent and severe blazes has scientists concerned that trees burned down may never grow back again. Exactly what I've stated for a decade and a half. Why did it take so long for some academic sources to admit to the truth? Next, from the UK Guardian, polar meltdown. And any that think that this won't impact them are woefully wrong. The poles are the Earth's air conditioners, and they are imploding. Climate engineering, in the desperate and dangerous attempt to hide the problem for decades, has only made it all worse. What a surprise. Here's the Guardian headline. 2 incredible extreme events. Antarctic sea ice on cusp of record winter low for second year running. The report says last year's Antarctic sea ice was 1.6 million square kilometers below average. That's the size of Britain, France, Germany, and Spain combined. This week, it had even less than that. The Antarctic region underwent an abrupt transformation in 2023 as the sea ice cover surrounding the continent crashed for 6 straight months. Sea ice surrounding Antarctica is on the cusp of reaching a record winter low again for a second year running, continuing a, quote, outrageous fall in the amount of Southern Ocean that is freezing over. Next headline from phys.org. Double dip. Antarctic sea ice sinks to new low for winter. Parallel headline. In 2023, winter extreme loss of Arctic sea ice outside everybody's expectations, the report states, not just due to its sheer magnitude, but because it's the wrong time of year. This winter, we again see chaotic fluctuations similar to last year, now producing the lowest winter extreme on record. Arctic sea ice and Antarctic sea ice both at record low. How many have always believed that the polar skies are naturally almost always covered over with a featureless canopy of cloud? Welcome to climate engineering, so-called solar radiation management, and now with constant climate engineering ramp-ups, the mid-latitudes often look exactly the same. Connect the puzzle pieces. New from Arctic News. Will we be alive in 2025? Who will survive 2025? And then this group of polar scientists pushes climate engineering. Just another chapter in the planetary asylum. From levernews.com, remaining calm about climate change will be our end. That's the end of the headline. They say anyone insisting that you calm down about climate change is living in denial about the catastrophes at our doorstep. And let's add this. Anyone telling you to be calm about climate engineering, aka weather warfare, or that tells you it isn't happening or that you're not actually seeing what you're seeing in our skies, is neck deep in denial, willfully blind, or both. On that note, here's a footnote of hypocrisy from Harrison Ford. Ford stated, "I'm scared to death about the denial of science. Science is real," Ford says. "Science is the most real thing in our world other than nature. I'm hoping we'll all get back to a place where we can really understand that science is tested knowledge," end quote. Science is real, Harrison Ford, the kind of science that blatantly denies shockingly obvious, real and present dangers like climate engineering, aka weather warfare, the kind of so-called science that routinely downplays or completely omits even mentioning dangers that their paymasters want desperately to keep hidden from populations. Is that real science to you, Harrison? Publicly admit to climate engineering on film and on the record, Harrison, and I will indeed listen to every word you have to say. Perhaps Harrison should be sent a link to the Dimming documentary available on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. As a species, we have now so fouled our nest that we face mathematically certain extremely near-term self-extermination, short of a complete course correction. Circle your wagons. The proverbial storm, aka unfolding collapse, is upon us. Not a bump in the road, the end of it. And we're already through the guardrail. Is panic necessary? No. Consider this 2,000-year-old nugget of wisdom from the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius, who said, "Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present." And how many are there that would never consider actually acknowledging the dire and immediate realities that are closing in on us, lest they be ridiculed and ostracized by family and friends? Again, a response from Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius. His insight should be considered deeply. He said this, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society," end quote. All are needed. to dig deep and summon the courage to be part of the cure and not the disease. And if we do so, no matter what happens, no matter how the story ends, the solace that comes from knowing at your core that you are on the right path, the narrow path, can't be taken from you ever by anyone. That is unshakable solace. The greatest and most immediate leap we can collectively make in the right direction is to first expose and halt the ongoing atmospheric aerosol spraying operations and the frequency transmissions that go with them. This can only be accomplished by fully exposing these operations to the entire world by reaching a critical mass of awareness. And if we can do this, we will have taken a quantum leap in the right direction. We will have altered the paradigm. We will cause a shockwave around the world. Never underestimate the power each of us has to start and stoke a spot fire of awareness. Sharing credible data from a credible source is key. Check the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for specific details on how you can help to move this fight forward. Please make your voice heard while it can still make a difference. Every single day counts in this battle. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.